Hi, I'm Kathy's husband Jeff, and this is going to be a real quick instruction video on how we make kefir here at our house. Okay? After my kefir has been in the cupboard for 14 to 24 hours, depending on the temperature and different conditions, I'm all set to go. I have a bowl, my strainer, and my kefir. This is so easy, guys. I mean, there's really nothing to this. I simply pour the contents of the mason jar into the strainer, let it drip into the bowl, and instead of a spatula, some people use a spatula to get their grains out. I have a tendency to just give it a little jiggle like this, and it works really, really good for me. Really well. And these grains have grown just overnight. I can't believe it. These grains are just wonderful. Lisa, I thank you so much for the starter set you sent me a few months back. They are so healthy. Look how many I've got in here. I put a teaspoon and a half, maybe 2 teaspoons, in with about 12 ounces of milk yesterday. And it hasn't quite doubled, but it sure looks like it has. So once I've got the kefir in here, give it a quick little stir, check the consistency of it. And a good way to tell if you've got some really good kefir, splash a little bit up on the side of the bowl. I hope you can see this. If not, I'll take a close-up picture. See these little delta rivers, they call them, that are starting to form on the edge of the bowl where I splashed the milk up? Those little veins, the little trails going down, that is an indication that you have some very potent, full of probiotic, delicious kefir ready to go. We're going to show you one more thing. There's some really, really good stuff in here. I mean, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's nice and thick and creamy and delicious. No sense in throwing that in the dishwasher at all. So, once I've cleaned the bowl best I can, you don't have to wash the jar every day. In fact, they suggest that you don't, maybe every third or fourth cycle, because the stuff that's in here is a really good booster for the grains when you start your next batch. Maybe that's my secret to getting my grains to grow really fast. I don't know. We keep our house around 70 degrees, 72 degrees, and inside the cupboard is where I store them overnight, which is next to the cooking stove. It doesn't really get that much warmer. I don't know if it gets any warmer really in the cupboard, but that's my growing conditions. I see there's a little bit more whey in here. Let me add my whey into the mix. Seriously, that's all there is to it. Now, if you want to do a second fermentation, all you do is pour your kefir back into the jar, flavor it with whatever you like, and put it away for another, it depends, 6 to 24 hours, depending on how strong you like it. Now, I'm going to pour this in, and my back is turned to you just in case I make a mess. You won't see it. Oh, look at that, not a drop on the counter. Okay, so that is all done. I'm not going to flavor this batch. I'm just going to loosely put my mason jar lid back on the jar. There are different methods you can use. If you don't have a mason jar lid that just fits very loosely, you don't want to tighten it up when you're fermenting. You need the gases to be able to escape so you don't get an explosion in your cupboard or whatever if there's too much pressure that builds up inside of the jar. If you don't have a lid, a coffee filter and a rubber band of some kind works perfect. Absolute, maybe even better, I don't know. But that's all there is to that. And it's ready to go back into the cupboard for its second fermentation. Now you can do it on top of the refrigerator, in the cupboard, on the counter. I don't think the place matters as long as the temperature is good. The warmer it is, the faster it's going to ferment. The cooler it is, the longer it's going to take to ferment. That's why when you're finished with your grains, if you want to store them and take a break for 3-4 days, 5 days, a week or so, Simply put your grains back into a mason jar, put about half the jar full of milk, is what I do, cover it loosely, and stick it in the refrigerator. It'll last in there for 7-10 days maybe. During your break time, if you notice, check on it occasionally if you can, at least every 3 or 4 days. If you notice that you've got some curds building up in the jar, some kefir building up, I've never used it making it in the refrigerator, but it's probably fine. Then I just, if I'm not ready for another batch, I'll just rinse the grains, recover it in milk, and put it back in the fridge again for another 4 or 5 days, how long ever it takes. So that is it. There's nothing to it. Step number 2 is taking your new jar, in this case, putting your grains back into the jar and covering it with milk. It's recommended about a teaspoon of grains per 8 ounces or 1 cup. I go a little bit stronger than that personally. In fact, the ladies I sent the grains to, you'll notice that that was probably a little more than a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half, or closer to a tablespoon even. And I suggested starting with 10 ounces of milk. You could do 12 ounces of milk with that. The exact amount that you use is going to vary depending on your conditions. Experiment with it. You can't go wrong. It's going to turn out, and then you'll know by the tartness of the finished product, or by how thick it is and creamy, whether you need to adjust the amount of grains that you have. There's tons of videos. If you just Google making kefir, you'll see lots of better videos than this one, trust me. But that's it. I'm going to cover this with milk and put it back in the cupboard, and the end. That's all there is to it, folks.